The glass hit the floor with a chime that cut through laughter. Water spread across the white linen like a slow-moving shadow. Alicia Brown froze. The tray trembled in her hands. Around her, the charity gala shimmered. Gold chandeliers, clinking forks, and polished voices pretending not to notice. Yet every eye had turned. The spill was small. The silence it caused was not. From the corner, a white floor manager named Ms. Caldwell moved with sharp heels and a sharper tone. "Unbelievable," she hissed, loud enough for the table to hear. "At $1,000 dinner, this is how you serve?" Alicia blinked, trying to speak, but her throat tightened. She reached for a napkin, but Caldwell was faster. "You're making it worse," the manager snapped. "Just step back." Guests shifted in their seats, some pretending to check their phones. One man whispered something that drew a smirk from another. The air thickened. "I'm sorry, ma'am," Alicia said softly. "I didn't mean..." "Didn't mean?" Caldwell interrupted. "Intent doesn't clean the floor, does it?" Her voice carried through the ballroom like static under music. Even the violinist stopped mid-note. A drip of water slipped off the table's edge and hit the carpet. The sound was tiny but final. Alicia bent down, pressing the napkin against the water. The fabric soaked it up, leaving a faint dark mark behind. In that reflection, she saw herself. Tired eyes, perfect uniform, and a name tag that now felt heavier than ever. Her mother's words flashed in her mind. "Hold steady when they try to make you small." "I'll fix it," Alicia said. "Steady now." But Caldwell wasn't finished. "Fix it? You've embarrassed this hotel. Do you even realize who you're serving?" Alicia didn't look up. The manager's voice scraped the air again, colder this time. "I said, look at me." She did, slowly, calmly. The light caught her eyes like glass holding back a storm. For one long second, no one moved. The guests stayed frozen, caught between guilt and comfort. Then the music started again, forced and artificial. Laughter followed. Nervous, hollow, wrong. In the back of the hall, a man in a dark tailored suit stood motionless. No drink, no smile. His gaze followed the scene with quiet intensity, as if memorizing every word. Caldwell brushed imaginary dust off her sleeve. "Next time, be careful. We can't afford mistakes." "Yes, ma'am," Alicia said. Her voice was calm, but her hand trembled as she folded the damp napkin into a perfect square. The water stain faded slowly, leaving behind a faint pale shape, something between a scar and a map. Alicia straightened her back. The chandelier light glimmered on her wet fingers. Across the room, the man in the suit turned slightly, his expression unreadable. The moment passed, but its weight stayed. The spill had been more than water. It was a mirror. One that revealed who stood tall and who simply looked away. The laughter returned before the truth had time to breathe. Glasses clinked again. Silver forks resumed their quiet dance against porcelain. From a distance, the ballroom looked perfect, a picture painted over discomfort. But beneath the glitter, silence had a weight of its own. Ms. Caldwell's voice still lingered in the air, sharp and cold. "You're lucky it wasn't red wine," she said, brushing past Alicia with the authority of someone who knew no one would question her. Alicia bent to collect the fallen glass, her hands steady but pale. Every movement was measured, precise, the way one acts when the world is watching but pretending not to. Her reflection bent in the curve of the crystal, fractured and distorted. Around her, guests whispered without words. A woman in diamonds looked away, fanning herself, though the room wasn't warm. A young man in a tux laughed softly at a joke that hadn't been told. Someone raised a phone, caught a photo, then pretended it was for the chandelier. Not one hand reached to help. The wealthy spoke of generosity on stage and turned away from dignity on the floor. A contrast too clean to notice. At the center table sat the hotel owner, his cufflinks shaped like tiny crowns. He glanced toward the scene once, then lowered his eyes to his plate. To him it was just maintenance, another minor disruption in a night priced to impress. Alicia kept moving. She cleared the table in silence, one plate after another, her eyes glassy but dry. The light from the chandelier caught the tears she refused to release, turning them into small, shining secrets. Ms. Caldwell turned back to the guests with a smile, her tone sugar-coated. "Now where were we?" "Dessert, yes." The crowd laughed again, too loud, too bright, the kind of sound that tries to bury guilt under noise, but one man didn't laugh. In the far corner, the suited man stood still, hands clasped loosely before him. His expression revealed nothing, but his gaze was fixed on the table, on the worker no one else could see anymore. His eyes moved between Caldwell and Alicia, a silent measure, as if recording the moral cost of the room's applause. The band began to play again, a slow, elegant piece meant to smooth the evening back into rhythm. Waiters carried trays like ghosts, gliding between guests who spoke of charity and change. Alicia set the last glass down. Her hands trembled only once. She looked at the shimmering crystal under the light, flawless, fragile, empty, and saw herself reflected between its edges. The chandelier above flickered briefly, scattering light across the guests' polished faces. None looked up. The night continued, pretending nothing had happened. But somewhere in that silence, something had shifted. Not loudly, not visibly, just enough for the man in the dark suit to take one quiet breath and decide that he would not look away. The key. Applause from the ballroom faded. Behind the kitchen doors, like music sinking. Underwater, Alicia pushed through the swinging panels and stepped into the service corridor. A narrow stretch of concrete walls, humming lights, and the faint smell of lemon cleaner. Here the air was different. No chandeliers, no polished laughter, just the clatter of dishes and the heartbeat of labor. She leaned against the wall, pressing her palms to the cool surface. Her breath trembled. For a long moment she didn't move. Then she heard her mother's voice again, soft, distant, but clear as ever. Hold your ground, even when no one sees you. Alicia blinked away the heat in her eyes. She couldn't afford tears. They wasted time, and time was a currency she didn't have. Her colleague Maria passed by, eyes down, tray in hand. You okay? She whispered. Alicia nodded. I'm fine. Maria's voice dropped lower. Caldwell shouldn't have done that. But, she hesitated. Just keep your head low. She fires quick. I know, Alicia said quietly. When Maria left, Alicia turned to her locker, small and dented, marked with peeling tape that read A. Brown. Inside were her worn sneakers, a photo of her son Malik, smiling in his school uniform, and a pair of old work gloves, one torn at the fingertips. She picked them up, running her thumb along the rip. Those gloves had survived 6 jobs, 3 cities, and too many double shifts to count. They fit her hands like a memory, tired but unbroken. She sat on the bench, letting the noise of the kitchen wash over her. The clang of trays, the hiss of steam, the sound of people surviving in silence. For a moment, her thoughts drifted backward, to late nights studying nursing textbooks after Malik was asleep, to mornings serving coffee before sunrise. She had promised herself that every shift, every scrape, every insult would be a step toward something better. Tonight felt like a step backward. But then she looked at the gloves again and smiled faintly. The tear wasn't a flaw, it was proof. Proof that she was still holding on. Proof that endurance had its own kind of dignity. She stood up, tucked the gloves back inside, and adjusted her uniform. In the mirror, she caught her reflection. Weary eyes, strong posture. A woman the world saw as invisible, but who carried quiet fire in her chest. The door creaked open. Another server entered, shaking her head. They're talking about you out there, she said softly. Half of them pretending it never happened. The rest saying it did. Alicia nodded once. Let them talk, the woman frowned. You're not going to complain? Alicia gave a small, steady smile. I don't have to. Life remembers things like that. She lifted her tray again, shoulders square, and walked back toward the light spilling through the crack of the ballroom door. Behind her, the torn gloves lay folded on the bench, a quiet emblem of every unseen worker who kept standing, no matter who watched. The champagne flute on his table caught the light but never moved. David Langford sat near the back of the ballroom, half shadowed by the glow of the chandeliers. Around him, guests floated through conversation. Laughter polished, smiles rehearsed. But his eyes were fixed elsewhere. He had built this hotel chain from the ground up. 5-star towers of glass and marble that promised luxury and grace. Yet tonight he was not here as a guest of honor. He had come quietly, without title or introduction, to see if the rumors were true. A rumor that his staff were being mistreated. Langford's gaze followed Alicia Brown as she carried plates with careful precision. her posture straight despite the humiliation she had endured minutes earlier. He had watched it all, the spill, the scolding, the way the crowd pretended not to see. The moment had said more about his empire than any report ever could. He turned the champagne glass slightly with his fingertips. The liquid inside rippled once, then settled again, calm on the surface, judgment beneath. From where he sat, he could see Miss Caldwell moving briskly between tables, her smile restored, her tone sweetened for the wealthy. The contrast was painful. For her superiors, she performed grace. For her subordinates, she practiced cruelty. Langford's assistant leaned close and whispered, "Sir, shall I?" He raised a hand. "No, not yet." His voice was low, almost detached. He wanted to see what people did when power wasn't watching. Alicia approached a nearby table. Her hands trembled slightly, but her movements were exact. Pour, step back, nod, smile. He admired that kind of control. Pain hidden inside composure. Dignity where none was given. From a distance, he could hear two executives at the next table boasting about bonuses and budgets. Their words blended with the faint music of a string quartet, filling the room with shallow elegance. Langford's jaw tightened. He knew how easily wealth could become blindness, how gold and guilt often shared the same reflection. He looked again at Alicia. When Ms. Caldwell passed behind her, Alicia stepped aside instinctively, creating space for someone who had taken hers away. The movement was small, almost invisible, yet it spoke volumes. Langford's assistant watched him silently, unsure what thoughts were forming behind that calm expression. The CEO leaned back, eyes steady on the floor manager. "Observe," he murmured. "Every company shows its truth when it thinks no one's watching." Caldwell paused near the main table, laughing too loudly at a donor's joke. The laughter didn't reach her eyes. Alicia continued her work in silence, unaware that the man watching her could change everything about her life. Langford's hand rested beside the untouched champagne glass. He never lifted it. For him, celebration felt out of place tonight. The glass stood like a mirror, clear, fragile, waiting for judgment to be poured. As the lights dimmed for the next speech, Langford glanced toward the stage, but his focus didn't waver. His decision was forming, slow, deliberate, like the still water before a wave. He would not act yet. Not until every mask in this room had fallen, and when he did, it wouldn't just be a correction, it would be a reckoning. The laughter that followed her was not kind. A man at the corner table, flushed with wine and power, leaned back in his chair and smirked. "Careful, sweetheart," he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Don't spill again. You've had enough attention for one night." The table chuckled. Ms. Caldwell's voice cut through it, sharp as a blade. "Mr. Reynolds is right, Alicia. Apologize for the disruption earlier and let's move on." Alicia froze, tray balanced in her hands. The silver reflected her face, calm, controlled, but trembling at the edges. "I already did, ma'am," she said softly. "Do it again," Caldwell ordered, her tone clipped and cold. "This time, say it properly. You're representing us." Around the room, glasses paused mid-air. Forks hovered. The crowd sensed something unfolding, something they wanted to see but not touch. Alicia's fingers tightened around the tray. "With respect, ma'am," she said, voice trembling but clear. "I've done nothing wrong." The air in the ballroom turned heavy. Even the band slowed, their instruments unsure. Caldwell's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Alicia steadied her breath, remembering her mother's words. "Hold your ground, even when no one sees you." "I said," she repeated quieter this time. "I've done nothing wrong." Gasps rippled across the tables. The guests, dressed in silk and confidence, stared at her as though she had broken a sacred rule. For a moment, even Caldwell looked stunned. Then her composure hardened. "Enough," she snapped. "You're finished here. Consider this your last shift." Silence. The sound of crystal tapping the table broke it. One guest setting down a glass too fast. Alicia looked around the room. Faces everywhere, but not a single one meeting hers. Her hands lowered the tray slowly. It rested flat on the linen, quiet and perfect like a verdict. For a moment, no one breathed. Then Alicia spoke, her voice steady again. "Thank you for the opportunity." She removed her apron, folded it neatly beside the tray, and turned toward the service door. Her steps were measured, her back straight. No tears, no plea. Just the sound of soft footsteps echoing through a hall that had never felt so loud. Behind her, Caldwell stood rigid, caught between anger and the discomfort of too many eyes. Someone whispered, "Did she really just walk out?" Alicia kept walking. Each step was a statement, quiet rebellion shaped like grace. When she reached the door, she glanced once over her shoulder. The chandeliers flickered. The tray she left behind gleamed under the light, untouched, unmoved, unshaken. A small island of stillness amid polished chaos. The room remained frozen. Caldwell adjusted her blouse, trying to reclaim control. "Back to your seats," she said sharply. "The show will continue." But one man didn't move. David Langford rose slowly from his chair, eyes fixed on the door where Alicia had just disappeared. The crowd watched him now, confused, uncertain, as if sensing that the night had shifted, and something far greater than a spilled drink had just taken place. He set down his untouched champagne glass, the reflection of its gold surface catching the tray across the room. And for the first time that night, someone finally stepped forward. The first sound was a chair scraping against marble, then silence. Every head turned as the man in the dark suit rose from his seat near the back. The chandeliers caught the edge of his cufflinks, a quiet flash of authority that needed no introduction. David Langford stood tall, his face composed, but eyes hard with quiet fire. He reached into his jacket and drew out a lanyard. Black cord, silver badge, simple yet unmistakable. When the light hit the metal, the engraved name glimmered like a verdict. David Langford, CEO, Langford Hospitality Group. A murmur rippled across the ballroom. The laughter died. Forks stilled midair. Someone gasped. Ms. Caldwell froze. The smile that had lived on her face all night collapsed into panic. "Sir, I didn't realize you were—" Langford's voice cut through her stammer like a clean blade. "No," he said quietly. "You didn't." He stepped forward, unhurried, the click of his shoes echoing in the wide hall. The crowd parted as he moved, a path opening before him as if the room itself knew who now held power. Alicia had stopped at the doorway, unsure whether to leave or turn back. When she saw him walking toward her, her breath caught, not from fear, but disbelief. Langford's gaze never left Caldwell. "You just fired the best employee I've seen tonight," he said. His tone was calm, but every syllable carried weight. "I came here unannounced for a reason. To see how this place treats the people who make it run." No one spoke. Even the band had gone silent, their instruments suspended midair. Caldwell's lips trembled. "Sir, it was a misunderstanding." Langford stopped in front of her. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated softly. "I watched you humiliate someone who showed more grace under pressure than this entire room combined." The words hung heavy in the air. No one dared breathe. He turned slightly, looking around at the guests, men and women who only hours ago had applauded themselves for their charity. "This hotel was built to serve excellence," he said. "But service isn't submission. Respect doesn't flow one way." He turned to Alicia. "Miss Brown, is that your name?" She nodded, eyes lowered. "Good," Langford said, "because I want everyone here to remember it." A ripple of whispers swept across the room, half shock, half shame. Caldwell tried to speak again, but Langford raised a hand. "You're done for tonight," he said firmly. "We'll discuss your future tomorrow." Her face went pale. She nodded silently, stepping back, small now under the same light she had once used to cast others in shadow. Langford's eyes softened as he looked back at Alicia. "You handled yourself with dignity when no one else did," he said. "And that matters more than any title." He turned toward the stunned crowd. "This evening was supposed to celebrate generosity," he added, voice carrying through the hall. "Maybe it's time we remember what that word means." Then he set his lanyard down on the nearest table, the nameplate gleaming beneath the chandeliers, and walked past Alicia toward the exit. The ballroom remained silent. Guests stared at the shining badge, the symbol of truth finally unveiled. Alicia stood motionless, her reflection caught in its metal surface. The night that began with humiliation had just turned into something else. A quiet, undeniable justice. The sound of his voice silenced the room before he even reached the microphone. David Langford stood at the center of the ballroom, no longer hidden, no longer quiet. The chandeliers shimmered above him, but the light seemed to bend toward his presence, calm, steady, commanding. Behind him, the hotel's crest gleamed on the wall, a symbol of prestige that suddenly felt hollow. "May I have everyone's attention?" he said. His tone was calm, but it carried the kind of authority that turned whispers into stillness. The crowd froze. Forks stopped mid-air, murmurs died, and all eyes locked on him. Ms. Caldwell stood near the front, pale and rigid, her posture now stripped of the confidence that once ruled the floor. Alicia remained near the door, unsure whether to stay or leave, but Langford's hand lifted slightly, a quiet gesture that asked her to remain. "I've spent years building this company," Langford began. "Hotels meant to welcome every person with dignity. But tonight I saw something that has no place under our name." His words hung in the air, sharp and precise. No one dared interrupt. He looked around the room, at the executives who had stayed silent, at the guests who had turned away, and finally at Caldwell. "What I witnessed was not leadership," he said. "It was arrogance disguised as order. Cruelty hidden behind policy." Caldwell swallowed, her voice barely a whisper. "Sir, I didn't—" Langford's gaze stopped her cold. "You didn't think anyone was watching," he said softly. "That's the problem." The sentence hit harder than a shout. He turned back to the guests. "Leadership defines culture," he continued. "And when leaders choose silence or humiliation, they teach others to do the same. Tonight was a mirror, one many of us didn't want to look into." A hush filled the space. The chandeliers flickered slightly, casting long shadows over polished tables. Then Langford's tone softened. "But the same mirror can show what's still right. One person chose dignity over pride, respect over fear." His eyes found Alicia. "Miss Brown," he said clearly, "you are officially reinstated. Effective immediately." Gasps spread across the room. Alicia's lips parted, but no words came. She stood still, her hands clasped tightly together, her breath unsteady. "As for Ms. Caldwell," Langford said, turning back, "your position is under formal review. Take the rest of the evening off." Caldwell's voice cracked. "Sir, please, this is not punishment," he interrupted. "It's reflection. A chance to remember why we lead in the first place." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then from the back of the room came a single clap, hesitant, uncertain. Another followed. Then another. Soon the sound grew, soft at first, then rising like a wave breaking against guilt. Guests and staff alike joined in, the applause spreading through the hall. It wasn't loud or triumphant. It was human, fragile, redemptive, real. Alicia looked around in disbelief. The same faces that once ignored her now met her eyes with something different. Remorse, perhaps, or awakening. Langford nodded once, the faintest hint of a smile touching his lips. The applause continued, steady and cleansing in that sound, not thunderous, but sincere. The night finally shifted. It wasn't victory. It was something purer, the first heartbeat of collective redemption. The city lights shimmered against the glass walls of the top-floor office, painting soft reflections across the room. The gala was over. The music long faded, but the night still carried the echo of what had happened. Alicia Brown stood at the edge of the carpet, hands clasped before her, unsure if she should sit. Her uniform was neatly pressed, though her eyes betrayed exhaustion. Across the desk, David Langford looked out over the skyline, quiet, thoughtful, as if weighing more than business. "Miss Brown," he said finally, turning toward her, "do you know why I asked you to stay?" Alicia shook her head. "No, sir," he smiled faintly. "Because tonight reminded me of something I had forgotten, who my company is supposed to serve." He walked to his desk, opened a folder, and slid a document across the polished surface. "This," he said, "is a management training scholarship. It covers full tuition, travel, and mentorship under our leadership program. I want you to take it." Alicia blinked, unsure she had heard correctly. "Sir, for me?" "For you," he said simply. "You've shown what real leadership looks like. Grace under pressure, respect even when it wasn't returned. I need people like that shaping what comes next." Her eyes filled, but she kept her voice steady. I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Langford replied with a calm smile. Alicia looked down at the letter. The paper trembled slightly in her hands. Printed across the top was the company's emblem, the same crest that hung over the ballroom hours earlier, now meaning something entirely different. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then in a quiet voice, she asked, "Sir, can others apply too?" Langford tilted his head, surprised. "Others?" "Yes," she said. "The staff who've been here longer than me. Some of them taught me everything I know. It wouldn't feel right if I were the only one given this chance." Her words hung in the air, soft but powerful. Langford leaned back, studying her. The steadiness in her tone, the humility in her eyes. It was the kind of question that revealed character without trying to. He nodded slowly. "You just turned a single scholarship into a program," he said. "Consider it done." Alicia's lips parted in disbelief. "Thank you, sir." "No," he said gently. "Thank you for reminding me what leadership really means." He extended his hand. She shook it, firm but respectful, and for the first time that night, the air felt light again, not from relief but renewal. As Alicia left the office, the corridor outside glowed faintly with the morning light. The hotel was quiet, the chaos of the gala replaced by calm. She paused at the elevator, holding the letter close to her chest. It wasn't just paper. It was proof that dignity, once tested, could rewrite the rules of power. Behind her, Langford stood by the window, watching the first rays of dawn wash over the city. In his reflection, the company crest gleamed beside the faint outline of Alicia's departing figure, a symbol of change, born not from wealth, but from conscience. The story did not end in the ballroom. It began there. By morning, clips of the confrontation had already spread online, a 10-second video of a manager's outburst and a waitress standing still beneath a chandelier. Millions watched, some condemned, others defended, but all agreed on one thing. Dignity, once seen, could not be unseen. News anchors called it the Langford moment. Hashtags filled every feed. Debates unfolded about race, respect, power, and the unseen workers who keep the world turning. The hotel chain released a public statement within hours. "We believe leadership starts with empathy," it read. For once, a corporate promise wasn't just talk. Under Langford's direction, the company launched staff equity programs, raised wages, and introduced mandatory ethics training for management. Ms. Caldwell submitted her resignation quietly. 2 weeks later, there was no headline, no farewell post, only a short email thanking the staff and wishing them well. Most ignored it. Some felt pity. Few felt surprise. Alicia Brown, however, didn't speak publicly about the event. She stayed focused on her work, now wearing a crisp new uniform embroidered not with service, but supervisor. Her first act as part of management was simple. She turned the break room wall into a message board, where any employee could post anonymous feedback. "If the system listens, it learns," she said. She continued her studies at night, balancing classes with her new responsibilities. Between shifts, she helped new hires learn the ropes, teaching them not just how to serve, but how to stand tall. When asked what kept her motivated, her answer was always the same: because someone believed silence was strength, and I proved them wrong. Across the country, schools and leadership programs began using her story in seminars. Professors called it a study in quiet courage. Talk shows featured her as a symbol of grace meeting power. She turned down most invitations, preferring the peace of purpose over the noise of fame. Langford, meanwhile, visited branches across the nation, meeting employees face to face. "A business doesn't rise from marble floors," he said in one address. "It rises from the hands that sweep them." The once untouchable world of hospitality was changing, not through protests or headlines, but through conscience, policy, and the echo of a single woman's restraint. Every morning, Alicia walked through the same hotel doors, not as the girl who spilled water, but as the woman who stirred change. Her uniform, pressed, proud, and bearing the company's crest, was no longer a mark of servitude. It was leadership stitched in fabric. The ripple had become a wave, and for the first time, the system that once looked away began to see. The chandelier gleamed above her, the same one that had once watched her fall. Months had passed since that night, yet as Alicia Brown stepped into the grand ballroom again, every sound and shimmer carried an echo. The floor was polished to perfection, The music soft, the air thick with perfume and memory. But this time she did not wear a uniform. She wore confidence. Her name rested on the evening's program. Guest of honor, Alicia Brown, a voice for dignity. As she walked between the tables, servers nodded to her with quiet pride. Some she had trained herself. A few whispered her name like a reminder that things could change. Cameras flashed, but Alicia's expression stayed gentle, almost humble. She wasn't here for attention. She was here to close a circle. David Langford stood near the stage speaking to a group of executives. When he saw her, he smiled. Not as a CEO greeting an employee, but as a man acknowledging someone who had reshaped his empire from the inside out. "Welcome home," he said simply. The words landed softly, yet they carried more weight than any applause. Alicia nodded, her eyes sweeping across the ballroom. The same walls, the same chandeliers, yet a different kind of light. This time there was warmth instead of judgment, respect instead of silence. The dinner began. Speeches came and went. When Langford introduced her, the crowd rose in applause. Sincere, not polite. Alicia stepped to the podium, the same spot where she had once stood invisible. Her voice was calm, her hands steady. "I used to walk this floor," she began, thinking no one would ever remember my name. I was wrong, not because of what happened to me, but because of what came after. Dignity isn't a luxury, it's a right. And sometimes it takes a small moment, a single act of courage to remind us all. She paused. The room was silent, not in fear, but in listening. "True power," she said softly, "isn't measured by wealth or title. It's measured by how we treat the people we think no one's watching." Applause broke again, slow and steady, like rain on glass. Some wiped their eyes. Others simply bowed their heads. When the evening ended, Alicia returned to her seat near the corner of the ballroom, the same area where her story had begun. On the table before her, a single candle burned. Its flame danced gently, reflecting in her glass of water. She stared at it for a long time. That tiny light had survived every draft, every breath, every attempt to dim it. It flickered, fragile yet undefeated. She smiled. The candle was more than decoration now. It was truth, the quiet, persistent kind that doesn't shout but endures. As the guests began to leave, Alicia stood and looked up at the chandelier once more. The crystals shimmered, scattering light across the floor like small blessings. She whispered, not to anyone in particular, "We all carry a candle. We just have to protect its flame." Then she turned toward the exit. Her shadow long, her step calm, her purpose clear. Behind her, the lone candle still burned, steady, golden, alive, a testament that in every dark room, there remains a light that refuses to die.